Hello again, Philip Nathan here for the 10th video in this series, this one addressing the crucial area of peace, violence and conflict. These issues of peace, violence and conflict are addressed by a number of principles put forward in Living Humanism. And as with the range of principles, these operate within the core framework, of the core principles of supporting well-being for ourselves and all others, and reducing and preventing pain and suffering for ourselves and all others too. Clearly, doing violence to others, aiming to hurt others, is at odds with the core principles. An initially relevant principle from the Living Humanism Guides is more specific principle 2, which says that we should resolve differences and disputes wherever possible through discussion, cooperation, mutual understanding, and respect. Filling out this principle, it has to be acknowledged that disputes and disagreements between us as individuals, between communities and societies, and beyond, are almost certain to occur when we pursue our own well-being and the well-being of all others. In support of well-being, it's essential that these disputes and disagreements are resolved peacefully, when that is at all possible. To do this, we have to respect the humanity of others, aiming to understand their points of view, their interests, or at least the origins of these points of view. And we need to work to develop our abilities to act cooperatively, and as far as we can, aim to find constructive, successful, agreeable solutions that meet the needs of all parties wherever that is possible. Of course, peaceful and cooperative solutions are not always possible. Others, for example, may not be motivated by any concern for our well-being or that of others, and they may privilege their own well-being and that of those within their groups to an unacceptable extent, ignoring our own concerns and well-being. With some of these people willing to visit violence and pain on ourselves and others. There are those who are cruel, callous, drunk with their own power, and even those psychopaths who may wish to do us harm, gaining a sense of pleasure and power from such acts of violence. So where the actions, mindset, and beliefs of others seriously threaten the well-being of others, ourselves, our communities, societies, our humanity, and where efforts at accommodation, compromise, and cooperation are proving unsuccessful, then we will likely need to be strong and robust in our responsive actions in order to protect ourselves and others, and to maintain and support the well-being of ourselves and others. And this does mean that for Living Humanism, while aggressive violence is unacceptable, the use of forceful action for self-protection and the protection of others is considered reasonable and legitimate, though optimally this should be carried out at the minimum level of force necessary. Moreover, within the framework of Living Humanism put forward in this guide, there is no problem in being prepared and aware of those who might do us violence. There's no problem with being ready to defend ourselves and others from aggressive violence. Thus, in line with the principle of supporting and working for peaceful cooperation, discussion and mutual understanding, more specific principle 4, I would say this is in line with working for peaceful cooperation. More specific principle 4 in Living Humanism tells us explicitly not to use aggressive violence, that we should do our utmost to avoid taking physical action against others, and that we should do our utmost to prevent others taking part in and engaging in aggressive violence. Aggressive violence is in its nature contrary to core principles. It's heinous and damaging. Where others are planning or engaging in aggressive physical violence against ourselves or others, then we must engage in all practical and reasonable steps to prevent such aggressive violence. And we must act to prevent harm, pain, and suffering. Wherever we can, considering the extents and limits of our powers, we cannot and must not leave others to suffer, to be injured, destroyed, murdered by those enacting aggressive violence. And what this means is that under various circumstances, having engaged in cooperative and peaceful efforts to prevent such aggressive violence, the forceful physical action already mentioned may be necessary for the purposes of defense of ourselves or others from such physical threats and such aggressive, violent physical action. And this applies at both the individual, community, society, and a global level. Our actions in preventing such aggressive violence need to be implemented at the minimum level necessary in order to avert danger, injury, pain, and suffering, and should cause the minimum necessary pain and suffering to those adopting aggressive violence. We should never be aiming to implement unnecessary physical or mental pain on others. Our physical, forceful response to aggressive violence should be enacted only where there are no reasonable and viable alternative strategies for defense and protection, and where, as far as we are able in the circumstances, all other reasonable actions to prevent pain and suffering have been considered, evaluated, or where possible, tried and perhaps failed. Consonant with our humanist rejection of aggressive violence, as stated in more specific Principle 3, we must never pursue revenge, which is destructive for everyone, both for the person or group aiming for revenge, and of course for those who may be the target of such revenge. While, as I've already said, it's a necessity to tackle those who engage in acts that have seriously or that maybe seriously damaging ourselves and others in an ongoing manner, the purposes of our actions must, as far as possible, be to ensure the well-being of each individual person, including those who've engaged in destructive acts against us. We must ensure the well-being of our communities, societies, and of our broader humanity as far as we can, and aim to reduce and prevent pain and suffering. And so revenge, which aims to hurt others, cannot be acceptable conduct. Indeed, it is totally unacceptable. And not only with regard to the aim to physically hurt others through acts of revenge, we must never conspire vengefully against others over time in self-contained vengeful silence or in secretive and hidden ways. Revenge is destructive in its nature, enhancing cycles of conflict, of violence and destruction, as individuals and groups engage in battles to hurt and to damage each other. Within the humanist framework of supporting well-being and happiness of all and reducing pain and suffering, this revenge is destructive and unacceptable. Revenge is, by its nature, destructive to everyone. Other principles in the Living Humanism Guide make statements which are consistent with these principles of cooperation and collaboration, rather than pursuing aggressively violent means to ends. More specific Principle 12 describes the importance of caring for others, spending time caring for others, while more specific Principle 17 talks about being prepared to forgive. Additional and related Principle 1 talks about being generous, sharing and kind, though not allowing yourself to be exploited, which should support a context of peaceful collaboration and cooperation, while additional and related Principle 20 speaks to being tolerant of those holding different views from your own, even where these views are astounding and offensive, except perhaps where these views offer a profound and significant physical threat to ourselves and others. Finally, additional and related Principle 25 presses for us to attempt to see the world from the perspectives of others, while the final principle presented is simply that of give love, something truly incompatible with aggressive and unnecessary violence. So I've covered quite a few ideas in this video. Again, the chapter on this in Living Humanism is rather longer and goes into much more detail. That's in the book guides. As ever, if you have comments, points of agreement and disagreement, then please put them in the comments area below this video. So If you've got this far and watched all the videos in this Living Humanism series, then you've come a long way already, but there are more to come. The next video looks at being just and fair in our personal lives and beyond, and pursuing justice. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you soon.